Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Magic the Gathering Arena. Today is Monday, June 8th. I played over the weekend and I feel like we kind of reset the weekend's XP in an awkward position. But apparently it didn't reset and it's not going to reset again for another 132 hours, which would be, I guess, Monday or about a week. So I got 15 extra victories. That way we need to re-roll this first. That way we could then have further progress since this ends in 16 days towards rank 80. Which, by all semblance, it seems like we won't have any real problem with that. The thing that we're really going to have a problem with is we'll have 2,110 gems at the end, and I need like 3,000 to buy the mastery level for the core set 2021. And if you don't buy the mastery level, you don't get any gems back. So it's not as big of a deal as long as we play some drafts and use some gold to get some gems by playing drafts. But then we run into the problem of we don't have much gold either. So it seems like we've run into the just free to play issue here, where we're running low on gold if we were going to open 20 packs of core set 2021, and we're low on gems, which we could only get through free to play by using gold. So at some point here we may have to buy something. And I don't appreciate that idea one bit. I really don't want to put any more money, or much more money, into Magic the Gathering, as they constantly are just a hassle and like a greedy bad company that I really don't feel like deserve the level of support that they get. And that is to completely ignore the Historic Anthology Bundle, which is another 2,500 gold or 4,000 gems. And that's completely ignore the $100 they want most people, or they really want all people to spend in every expansion. These expansions feel like, to me, that they come way too frequently compared to Hearthstone, and definitely doesn't feel like you can just play Hearthstone as well. These packs are just rewards that I got for going up to mastery level, but also not probably a lot of new cards. Now, because I did play off screen, we do have a decent number of cards that were individually given. So if we go look at the collection, there's a few little things here and there that are getting filled in. Here we got a 4th copy of that. But it is definitely still going to be weird once we lose everything from Ravnica and War of the Spark in core set 2020, and we're down to just Eldraine, Theros, and Ikora. Also, there's a new suspension today, which is ridiculous that they would hand out a new historic suspension just as a quick adjustment. It's like, it really does feel like Magic does not playtest their cards at all, or doesn't think about anything at all, in such a weird way that you're even here we have 1,000 XP, so we need to play this for the historic shakeup. Which, there's a little star here. What does the little star mean? I don't know, but it looks like we can play it. So, alternative banned list for this event. Okay, that's weird, but whatever. Yeah, when they put out the update, when they announced that things were being banned from standard, things that were fairly new cards, or if not brand new cards, were being banned. And when they say that those are also in the suspension list of historic because they don't want to outright ban anything from historic permanently, they're really just playing verbal politics there and trying to convince you that, oh, historic doesn't have a very large ban list, when really it's just going to have a large suspension list instead. But all of those announcements should have been at the same time. The fact that they're coming out with yet another historic suspension just a day later just shows that there's literally no thought being put into what the cards do and what they are created for, or how they'll synergize or play. This is the slippery slope that Magic went down when they introduced that trickster planeswalker character that then got very quickly banned from Throne of Eldraine. And before that point, I think Magic had been a lot more considerate and a lot more thoughtful as far as their creations and as far as things, as far as their rules were going. Is there anything more to say about Magic? No. So for the accountability section today, I finished up The Evil Within 2. Very unhappy with the level of quality there. Particularly, like, the final boss that you fight in that game is good, but none of the other boss fights in that game are good at all. And you just get ran through a very linear game after the first act. And it's just straight up deceptive advertising. The first couple hours of The Evil Within 2 feels like it is this open world, or at least small open world or large open area action zombie stealth game, and all that just disappears and you are literally just on a linear path for the last two sections, to the point where you can't even go back to the original open world section. Its story for The Evil Within 2 is really muddled and messy, and it's nowhere as good as the first game. It wraps up the whole series for kind of no good reason, when you would have been better off leaving it open for a continuation. If anything, I would have kind of preferred, and I guess if you were going to try and continue the Evil Within series, I'd say you ignore the second one and you just have an anthology series that have called The Evil Within, that centers around the general concept of psychological horror and kind of nothing else, because that's all that you really needed. Yeah, and it's very telling in Evil Within 2 that there's a sequence where they bring back all the enemies from the Evil Within 1, and they, in comparison, are way more interesting fights, even though they're very short fights. Or at least they were for me. I also played the game Ben and Ed that was so graciously gifted to me, and I don't want to insult anybody or have anybody feel bad about it. I am glad I owned Ben and Ed, and that I got to play it and make my footage and criticize it. But after about 3 hours of it, the fact that it was a frustration platformer got to me, and I very softly rage quit the game. it didn't have any stuttering issues. So if you are having stuttering issues in Ben and Ed, I could certainly see how you would have a much worse experience than even I was. But as a game, it's an insulting mess of an experience that doesn't really help you and doesn't really checkpoint you at any point. So if you are having trouble with like one section that is right before a checkpoint, you will die over and over again trying to get to a checkpoint. And because you're playing as a zombie, you run into this scenario that you usually wouldn't have in a game like this, where Ed the zombie can have his legs or arms chopped off. If his legs are missing, he can't jump, and very often you have to jump right before you get to a checkpoint. I got past the first annoying boss fight. I didn't even make it to the second annoying boss fight. Every time you reset the game in Ben and Ed, it doesn't reset the location of the lasers or the swinging axes or anything like that. So you very often will respawn and be off cycle. So even if you were trying to get really good at the game and get the pattern locked down, it's practically impossible. The camera doesn't automatically turn for you, which is often a problem, particularly when you got to a section where you had to stay inside a spotlight, or you would get hit immediately with a laser light, which was just a cruel addition, frankly. It would have been alright if they had decided to have a countdown where it went like beep 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 and gave you 5 seconds to get back into the light. But to instantly kill you in a platformer is not fair or fun. Like, when you think of Mario 64 in comparison, and that would be the style of platformers that I would definitely be more interested in playing. The thing that happens in Mario 64 if you fall down is you just fall down, and you can then get back up, and it's not really a big deal. At no point in Mario 6, well, very rarely in Mario 64 do you fall into just an infinite void and die instantly. Some of the very later sections that happens to, but most of the time you'll just run into a lava section where if you touch lava in Mario 64, you'll take some damage and then bounce back up to a platform. And if you take damage, then you just need to get a coin or two to recover it. No, I don't want to play that a second time. Unless it was going to give me 1,000 XP every time, which would be nice. Magic has also had this problem of just going to a black screen when I'm loading it. And that's pretty annoying too. I did look at the follow-up game to Ben and Ed Blood Party. It's just like a 4-player version of that has, I think, workshop support. Ben and Ed kind of feels like a very indie and very bad attempt at doing something that Mario Maker later on was able to do a lot better. There's oddly no timer system in it, so there's no real reason to speedrun it. I watched a speedrunner play the game, and he beat the game mostly by cheating. Clipping through walls, throwing the detachable and tossable head of the zombie in long distance throws that no regular player would have a chance of knowing were even capable. But what I definitely did not see even with the speedrunner was an example of people being particularly skilled. There's a random generating challenge in Ben and Ed, and when I tried the second random generating challenge, it started with these floating platforms. The floating platforms randomly appeared at different heights, and more often than not were impossible to actually jump from one to the other. They just were not even programmed right, and that is the thing that Ben and Ed really strikes me as, is that there's no tight controls, there's no programming to make sure it actually works. It's just kind of thrown out there. I wanted to call it an asset flip and said that a couple of times, but it's not really an asset flip, even though almost all the art very possibly was pre-bought from the Unity asset store. They did something different with it, but there definitely is problems. One of the major problems I would put out there is that they have this emote ability with the zombie, where he will do a thumbs up, or he'll twerk, or he'll stretch in some way, and that's all funny and great, but it's really questionable why somebody focused their attention putting in these animations and these emotes, and let's face it, probably just licensing those animations and emotes, instead of trying to find a solution for the fact that most of the Ben and Ed levels are designed so that you will fall to your death if you go even slightly the wrong direction, left or right, or trying to address the issue of the fact that there's just not enough checkpoints. The bonus systems in the bonus levels in Ben and Ed are extremely gated behind large amounts of piles of cans you have to knock over, but the piles of cans are stacked up in a pyramid for practically no reason, and they don't even really make it obvious what's in the cans, whether it's brains in the cans or just meat or human flesh in the cans. They just don't focus on that enough. They should probably have loading screens that have like little advertisements for the cans. Not that there's a ton of loading screens. But yeah, overall, the thing that I get the feeling from, and I kind of knew this even going in it, is that Ben and Ed was a game designed so that Markiplier and other YouTubers could play up and pretend like they're getting super frustrated while playing a frustration platformer, and that worked just because Markiplier or some famous YouTuber played it, and that's as much effort was ever put into it. And unlike something like Super Meat Boy, where Super Meat Boy is really tight controls and frustrating platforming, sure, and you will die a lot, but it is super fair too. If you get good at Super Meat Boy, you can actually be good at Super Meat Boy. There's not any random elements. There's not anything that is just going to screw the player over and make it impossible. And that's why when I've watched speedruns of people playing Super Meat Boy, they can actually play Super Meat Boy instead of just hoping that they luck out in certain sections. And see, that was when I was watching the speedrun of Ben and Ed, that was the most prevalent thing, is that even the speedrunners going, that sucks, this is unfair, and that would have been the one person on the internet that should really love the game and not be not have those feelings. But yeah, it's I in all realisticness also rage quit Super Meat Boy because I'm just not that good of a player. I would also say that the controls are, it has half control support, so whenever you get to a menu, the menu doesn't work on a controller, but then also the controller has a problem whenever the controller, what am I trying to say here? You don't have a way of really slowing down with the controller, and you don't have a way of adjusting the sensitivity, so the left stick is very slidey, and you do kind of just feel like when you let go of the left stick you should just stop immediately, as if your feet were just nailed to the floor and there should be a snap back, and it's not that. He kind of slides a little bit more, and there's no sensitivity adjustment there, nor is there a way to make Ed, the zombie you're playing as, slow down with the controller, even though there's an option with the keyboard to do that. So yeah, it really was a kind of great example of a game that I like to, as a video game critic, criticize. But again, I want to just say I am in no way unhappy or dissatisfied with my experience. I would say that most people probably would be, if they just bought Ben and Ed, they probably would play it for less than 2 hours, and then they should probably really think about getting a no question asks refund on it, because there's a lack of actual programming there that's not really justifiable. This red test deck, I don't know what I'm really doing with this. Exile target creature you control, then reveal cards from your library until you have a creature with a higher thing. Well, okay. Well, that worked. That worked amazingly well. How in the world did that happen? Let's see. Exile target creatures you control and reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature with a higher converted mana cost. Put that card in the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library. Wow. So, at any point, this guy can just pull out quite the beast. Interesting. Deal 3 damage to this. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to have enough. Let's see, let's do that again. Let's do this, and then this. I don't know if I'm going to have played enough cards, but a free victory certainly couldn't be a bad thing. I could cycle this for 2. Really just trying to play cards. You know, I realized something on Twitter now as the video game companies are kind of slowing down with the Black Lives Matter posts and things like that. Now it's a different week. The number one person who consistently posts something political that I follow on Twitter is the person in charge of YouTube gaming. Like, which kind of just goes to show that this is inherently the problem with the employees at Google and YouTube in general, is that I am maybe following his personal Twitter, but he's definitely not like curating who can follow him. If it is a personal Twitter, I don't know if that's really something you do on Twitter too much. And in all fairness, YouTube Gaming's Twitter feed in general is fairly quiet. But it does go to show that just on a day-to-day basis, the person in charge of trying to make YouTube Gaming successful, which it's been not very successful at all, is distracted and unfocused on and just like dangerously openly political, like most YouTube employees and Google employees. And you see that certainly from the top too, that Susan Wojcicki, when she chooses to tweet something, which is very rarely, it's almost never having anything to do with YouTube in general. It only has something to do with YouTube if it is somehow increasing her personal celebrity or in some way promoting her personal politic beliefs. So yeah, I guess in general, I guess that is my own fault for following them. Let's see. They may be deciding to throw some maintenance at us right in the middle of my stream. Thanks, Magic. But you know what? If that's the case, then we can just hunker down and stop playing Magic, because we would be stopped at that point, and then we can do some wishlist cleanup, which I feel like there is some wishlist cleanup that needs to be done. Definitely before the summer sale happens. And I would also say that there's some general new thoughts that need to be thrown into some of the games. Like Command & Conquer Remastered is a confusing mess now that it is out, because there's nothing actually called Command & Conquer 2, and Command & Conquer Remastered has like all the DLC for Command & Conquer 1, which would include like Red Alert 1, but it doesn't include Red Alert 3, which would be the next Red Alert series. And the order in which of those games need to be played is just all a fairly confusing mess. And yeah, I don't know exactly how you fix such a confusing mess, because what I think they would need to do is, I think they need to have a Command and Conquer 2 remastered come out. But really it would be Command and Conquer Remastered 2. And that should just include everything else that has been made. So Command and Conquer 3, Command and Conquer Red Alert 3, Command and Conquer 4, every little side game. Westwood is now out of business, so you're in this weird position where it is just Electronics Arts pretty much always. It's just EA putting out and throwing away the Command and Conquer series. Let's see, does this give it haste? Sure. We'll take that. Also, even the Command and Conquer Remastered series will be hundreds of hours of gameplay. And it turns out they did remaster all the graphics except for the live action video, and then they only used the artificial intelligence super sampling to improve the live action video. Which, okay, that kind of works. I mean, it's the best I can do. Let's see. Do we want to attack somebody? I don't think so. So yeah, I have that continued concern, not just for the Command and Conquer series, but for a lot of games that are on my wish list, is that I need to reevaluate. A lot of those games may have been put on 3 or 4 years ago. I've covered a lot of games. I've gotten particularly less capable of playing games and less interested in playing some styles of games. Hidden object games are a great example of that. Like, I put on a decent collection of hidden object games in the wishlist, and now I wouldn't be upset if somebody gifted me a hidden object game, but I probably wouldn't have anything new to say there either. Once you've kind of criticized one, you've pretty much criticized them all. Unless there is just some hidden gem out there. My new chair does not lean back enough. Now, it is against the wall, so that's part of the problem, but it is having me hunch over forward more than I was used to, and I don't know if I'm really in a situation where I need to evaluate whether I'm now just sitting more upright, or whether it's whether I need to try and adjust it. Probably need to try to adjust it. So yeah, let's just go through the news, and we'll then do some wishlist cleanup, and ideally we'll get all that to work. Like, the only reason we even have almost a full stack of games to talk about is because a lot of them were left over from Friday. It's not like a lot of things came out over the weekend. Alright, well. Let's get rid of the flying guy, I guess. This is a crazy way to do that, but... We don't need any more of that. We've got plenty of land. So Gamatsu has an article. A high-speed mech action game called Nimbus Infinity has been announced for next-gen consoles and PC. Okay. This might be something, or it might be nothing. The mech genre of games, always ambitious, never really making it to the West or really succeeding too much in the first place. It's basically, for the Japanese, I would guess, it's the equivalent as if we had dozens upon dozens of companies making Mickey Mouse spin-off cartoons. And there was just every 6 months to a year a new Mickey Mouse spin-off cartoon, and yet they all kind of stunk. But honestly, that's not a bad idea compared to there really not being any Mickey Mouse theatrical cartoon coming out for decades. Like the remake of Fantasia in what might have been like 2000 might have been the last time that there was a theatrical Mickey Mouse character. Which definitely goes to show a lot. Well, I am playing cards here. I guess that's about it. Although the slight difference I would also say between Mickey Mouse and the Gundam series is that even the first Gundam series was particularly very complicated story. It wasn't ever anywhere as simplistic as a Mickey Mouse cartoon. Where, like, Steamboat Willie, the first Mickey Mouse cartoon, was just like a 5-minute animation with singing and whistling and no real story above that. I'm yawning, which tells me I had not woken up enough. Oh no, the sting of defeat. Did we play enough red cards? No. Still need to play like 12 of them. It's annoying that for the most part, Magic just takes so much of your time that I have not been able to find a way to really rebuild any of the other decks. Like this red test deck really hasn't changed much since Ikora came out. And when the core set comes out, unless there are reprints to cards that haven't been in Magic Arena before, it becomes fairly hard to justify doing deck rebuilds on cards you may already have. Yeah, that is an issue certainly with Magic, is that cards come out brand new and they're banned and suspended within a week. Cards come out and they last for a month and they might be banned and suspended. And then cards last maybe a year or two, and then in default, they are banned and suspended from standard. So you're just constantly losing the ability to play your cards if you want to play standard, which is why so few people actually stick with standard for a very long time. Which might be fine if it weren't for the fact that Magic Arena was pushing standard way more than anything else, or Magic the Gathering was pushing standard more than anything else by far. Like, I totally understand the idea that standard might just be for new players, but it's not really for new players at all. There should probably be a newbie style of gameplay that is only the most recent expansion and just the most recent expansion. And then there should probably be a tier 2 of that is just the most recent expansion, and then the last recent expansion, all the way towards having the last year's worth of expansion, which would be 4 expansion, and then all the way to having the last 2 years of expansion at times, which would be what standard is. Because if you are a brand new player, you're still not really getting benefited much by standard, because it's still very possible that a lot of players simply have 3 or 4 expansions worth of different cards to challenge you. If anything, what Magic should do is they should create a special standard pre-built deck game that just includes the basics, the best of the best. So you just always have a 2/2 rare in this pre-built green deck. It is always playable. Like, no booster packs, nothing that tries to sell people on anything more. Something that's just like an introductory kids version of Magic, that literally a parent could buy a box of 5 pre-built decks, and those 5 pre-built decks are totally playable, but not even the same cards. And even Pokemon card game doesn't really work that way, so there really is no solution there. But yeah, Magic should have a deck building version of it instead of a collectible card game version of it, just for an introductory gameplay. And maybe digital versions of the game and Arena kind of help you with that. You do get some pre-built decks when you start playing Arena, but you immediately get pre-built decks that are playing against quite a large collection of other cards still. Like, ideally, you would want something where a reasonable entry-level player, who probably would be a 12, 14-year-old, could memorize and know each of the cards and understand what they do. And there should be just a few cards that have like cycling, a few cards that have like jumpstart, things that introduce those concepts without an entire deck being capable of playing all that concept. For instance, this deck is heavy on cycling. That wouldn't be a good example. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Sword and Spirit, which looks a little rough with this UI, and apparently you are only capable of fighting 4 enemies in the entire game. Yeah. Now it says fight unique enemies, is what it said. I thought it said 4. But yeah, looking at the screenshots, it does seem like this is a student project more than anything else. It's free to play and English only. And yeah, I still questioning the point of. I always have to question the point of putting on these low quality free to play games on Steam. It's like, why are you flooding this sales market this way? Twice X damage. Okay, attack, activate ability. Let's see, PC Gamer, I don't follow them too much anymore. They have a article 5 new Steam games you probably missed. June 1st, 2020. So did I miss any of these games? Well, I remember seeing this image. Alright, Reki, which apparently is on Steam and cell phone games. It looks like kind of a Klax clone. Dread X collection. Well, this looks like this is a collection of low effort games. Wildfire. Looks like it's on the Humble Bundle listing only. Rhythm Fighters. Actually, that interests me a little bit because there was a rhythm fighting game that was a student project that was reviewed fairly poorly. So two of these games I don't recognize. So I guess they're right. I missed some things. And that certainly does speak badly. I mean, there's really nothing to do about it. But it does speak badly to the What's on Steam Twitter feed. That games can just... can still just be missed. So here we have Rhythm Fighters, which is rated very positively. A fighting game with rhythm. Normally I would put this directly on the wish list, but it is a rhythm game, so I want to think about it a little bit more. It's $14.99, which is pretty expensive. It's English, Chinese, and Japanese. It is effectively just dumbing down Crypt of the Necrodancer, but that might very well be what people are looking for. Some people are looking for the roguelike elements of Crypt of the Necrodancer might not appeal to everybody. Here's the game Wildfire, which is being published by Humble Games and does look like it's a pixely platforming adventure game. It is on my follow list. So what I bet happens is that these games get put on my followed list when they first are listed in a lot of cases, and then they come out of early access, or they never were in early access but they were just pre-orderable. Let's see. I'm gonna have to really think about getting rid of companions. Like 6 mana for this card does not make sense. Here's the Dread X collection, which does seem like it is just a collection of random bad games, although it's rated very positively. So, Ten Tales of Terror from 10 Twisted Minds made only 7 sleepless nights. So this was some kind of game jam game collection that they're now selling for $6.99. Interesting. And it seems oddly highly positive. But everything I see here screams to me that I really wouldn't want to play any of these games. And at some point I think I just have to trust my instincts here and just say, no, I don't want to get suckered into buying 10 demos from a game jam for $6.99. So yeah, I'm just gonna have to say no to that. I'm gonna have to have some backbone and just say no. Actually, I should have probably used that on the flying guy, but whatever. Next, we have that game King Sim, which, yeah, it looks very text-based. Doesn't look particularly interesting. Does seem like PC Gamer was scraping the bottom of the barrel there. $9.99 for this game, English, Russian? I don't think so. I don't think that you want to pay $10 for a game that looks like this. That's pretty ridiculous. I think it's much more realistic to just embrace the reality of the situation and say, hey, games are not coming out very much at this point, and that's fine. That's fine for everybody except for the mainstream video game journalists whose very lifeblood survives only if they are constantly advertising and promoting new games, because they're constantly getting paid to advertise and promote new games. That's why you never hear many big video game journalists to say, hey, now would be a great time to go back and play something old, except for maybe, with the exception, the Giant Bomb group, which sell themselves more as personalities and make their money from memberships instead, so they can get away with having premium videos on their own listing things where they just play Nintendo games and old games. There was apparently some bit of scuff up with how Nintendo is changing its ambassador program on YouTube yet again. I don't think it really matters one bit until Nintendo realizes and recognizes the reality of the situation, that they can't have control. They shouldn't have control directly over the content creators out there that want to cover their games, and that fair use does exist even if they don't want to admit it, and it is US fair use laws that they should be following, not a stronger Japanese copyright laws, of which I did hear that they've kind of expanded the Japanese copyright laws. Not that it really matters too much in Japan, I doubt too many people are going to get arrested in Japan for violating copyright laws, or fined in Japan for violating copyright laws, since they take more of a much more hands-off approach with their legal system, unless you do something actively violent. Well, there was probably a way I could win this, and I probably should have paid more attention to do that. Yeah, had I not attacked with this, I could have blocked with that. Even though he has first strike, then I could have attacked in the next turn. Gamatsu has this week's Japanese game releases. So let's see the full list here. The Xbox One X Cyberpunk 2077 Limited Edition is launching worldwide, which I guess means Cyberpunk 2077 is launching. Also, Microsoft has done away with game activation codes for game bundles, and so whoever logs in their first account to a hardware that is a game bundle will get the license to the game. So what that effectively means is that if there were scammers buying the Xbox One Cyberpunk Limited Edition, they can't activate the game and then resell the hardware, or resell the hardware as if you're getting the game activation code when you really aren't. So it does stop a level of problem. It also actively hurts people that would have traded in their console bundle games that they just didn't care about. If for some reason you did get an Xbox One with Cyberpunk 2077 and you'd already gotten Cyberpunk 2077, and then you decide just to try and trade in the whole bundle, the Xbox One X and the game, GameStop, who aren't going to be in business much longer, probably wouldn't be willing to give you any extra money for the game being bundled in it, even less now than before. Let's see what else. We have a game called Kamiko for the Switch coming out. The Wonderful 101 remastered for the PS4 and Switch coming out, and those are the only two physical Japanese games coming out. And then digitally we've got more: Beyond Blue, Block Quote Maker, Double Dragon, and Kunio-kun Retro Brawler Bundle, Evans Remains, Gunbird 2, Jake Hunter Detective Story Prism of Eyes, Journey for PC and Steam, launching worldwide. That is surprising. I don't think I've heard that Journey was coming to PC, other than maybe I heard some rumors around that. Samurai Showdown Neo Geo Collection for PC via the Epic Games Store, which no link available. There's Satisfactory Early Access is coming out to Steam, or it's leaving Early Access. I thought it was leaving Early Access. And then there's one called Selfie Collection, and then there's a game called Yomi wo Saku Hana coming to Xbox One. Is there anything else? Some store cards, again, still available. That is a slightly higher number of it is a slightly higher number of what would be the right word, of games coming out digitally, but nothing amazing. really. Speaking of Japanese companies, though, since we weren't really talking about them, but whatever. There was a video that came out on YouTube from, I think, the Game Historian or somebody with a similar name on YouTube, that went through and did a bunch of interviews with Capcom Vancouver, the makers of Dead Rising 4, and just kind of went through the history of games that they were supposed to make, games that they wanted to make, games that got canceled, and why Dead Rising 4 really didn't turn out as good as it should be, or Dead Rising 3 didn't turn out as good as it should be. At a certain point, the company, in its original iteration before it was bought by Capcom, seemed to be really just trying a bunch of stuff, and probably not highly likely that they would have succeeded with any of those ambitious projects. But once they became a Capcom business, I feel like what happened is, at some point fairly quickly, there was a breakdown of communication, and it was definitely depicted in the video as if it was all Capcom Vancouver's fault, and definitely a lot of it was. But I also kind of wonder if Capcom Japan just kind of didn't care. Like, I kind of wonder if what they did, and this would be a fairly Japanese thing to do in business, is they were hoping they could convince everybody to just quit, that they had that mentality, instead of just saying, you know what, we'll just fire and shut down this studio, which I'm not sure Capcom Japan ever actually did fire and shut down the studios directly. But it did seem like they were kind of giving them busy. They might have been giving them busy work, and intentionally not communicating with them, so that they could come back later and say, well, why are you giving us why are you pitching a game to us that we didn't ask for, or why are you pitching features that we didn't ask for? If Capcom Vancouver had the faith of Capcom Japan, if they really were trying to support them, they wouldn't be putting out these split ideas. Like, that you can't really make the argument, I asked for this thing, when really you hadn't communicated at all. Because it may really have just been directly that Capcom Japan really did just want the next Dead Rising to be exactly like the previous Dead Rising. And maybe Capcom Vancouver literally just failed to communicate at all with their higher ups. And definitely Capcom Vancouver failed to be capable of actually making the game. Making the games in general. But I don't think it's, at least from a Westerner's perspective, I don't think it's a realistic thing to ask a creative group of people to do exactly the same thing as the previous people who aren't even working on the project anymore were doing. Maybe that is exactly what the Japanese people mentality is, though. Like, but the video definitely tried to paint it as it was 100% Capcom Vancouver's fault. I would say it probably was closer to 70, maybe even 80% Capcom Vancouver's fault. But I think at a certain point, it is worth recognizing, if you are doing business with a Japanese parent company, if you're not communicating with them every day, or if you're trying to communicate with them every day and they're not responding to you, then that is an indication of something's not working here. You're literally just not communicating and working with your same company. Because the way this story should have gone would have been that it really should have been a conversation where Capcom Vancouver pitched a bunch of things and Capcom Japan constantly shot down those things, and then the higher ups go, okay, you don't like that, so let's not do that, so we make our client happy. The only way you get into a situation where they don't respond to you, and this would be true I think for a lot of jobs, like if your boss is not talking to you, if you're not responding to emails, you're not long for this world, obviously. Like, bosses, their number one job is to be communicative and talk and direct and act as a leader. And even if you're the boss of Capcom Vancouver, you have to know you have a parent company and you have bosses too. So, so the idea that wouldn't come into play is not realistic. Yep. So I guess that is probably a long way of saying communication is key. On the other hand, I will point out that some of actually quite a lot of the people I've worked with have not been wanting or capable of communicating with me much. A lot of my bosses didn't do that, and in some cases it was fine and preferable, but in some cases it was kind of a nightmare scenario also. It probably did lead to situations later on near the end of those jobs where had we had a more interactive relationship, we may not have ended up separating so much. But yeah, one of my first jobs, I had a boss that didn't know how to be a boss and was allowing another employee who was more senior, he'd been there longer, to act as the boss without taking on any of the responsibility of being the boss, which was a bad situation. It's one of those cases where they offered the senior employee the chance to move up in the company, and he said no thanks. And at that point, the management that had offered that should have fired him and let him go. At least they should have known in the back of the head that they're going to let him go, because that's just not a situation that is doable. When a company asks you to step up and move up in your career and you say no, well then obviously you just want to you really can't say no, like, because you should just be fired at that point. And that would be the good management response. There is like, here I'm offering you this great gift and you're rejecting it, so I think that's as far as this relationship can go. And then I had a job where I had a boss that never wanted to talk to me, but the job was basically kind of a cakewalk, and they knew I could do the job as well as anybody else. And if they were going to talk to me, it was simply because their bosses were telling them to yell and complain about something. The old terrible boss method of just, I've always got to find something to complain about. I've always got to do something to have some documented reason, either to fire this person or to look like I'm doing my job or motivating this person. And that boss didn't buy into that, and he was much more, yeah, you just stay out of my hair and I'll stay out of your hair. We'll collect our paychecks and do the job and go home. It was quite nice, considering that was pretty much all you could do at that job. However, unfortunately, that boss at some point no longer worked there. I don't know if they got a better job or if they actually got laid off, as eventually that job started laying off everybody. And that boss got replaced with somebody who did exactly that, who was just constantly making up excuses to complain about my performance, and constantly only trying to communicate to me in a negative way. Like, every single conversation, if we were going to have a conversation, became increasingly negative and increasingly hostile, and at a certain point all you can do is respond kind for kind at that point. So it very quickly was forced by the employer to do that. And then also I had a boss who literally didn't really care at all about whether I was employed or not, because they had just lied from the word go, saying it was a permanent job, a permanent position, and they really just wanted me around to fill a seat, to be a warm body for about 30 days so that they could go on a vacation to Las Vegas. And the exact day that they came back from Las Vegas, they then immediately said they didn't need me anymore. So, yeah. But because of that, I had all of maybe 3 conversations over the course of working for them for about 30 days with the boss there. So yeah, I've had a couple of experiences, maybe more than average, of bosses that don't want to talk to employees, and I definitely recognize that as a red flag. Like, if you're not working together as a team, you're not really a team, and there's a dysfunction there. Anyways, back to video games. Here's Journey, and apparently, yeah, this is the first time of me hearing that Journey is coming to PC. Cool. Is there something about Annapurna Interactive? No. Other than I just have not covered any of their games up until this point. I've wanted to, certainly, but I haven't gotten around to it. I would suspect that might mean that their games haven't been on sale that much. Let's just take the movement here. We've 2 against 1. Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Their Radiance, which looks like an MS Paint game that's rather zoomed in and seems to be just a poorly animated platformer with no enemies or anything from the looks of it. It's free, and it's English only. Nothing interesting there. this, and then this, and then this, and we'll go ahead and attack with everything. See. Apparently the scheduled maintenance has been completed and we weren't kicked off. Interesting. So here's the Magic suspension update for historic digital format. Let's see. They're going to get rid of Winota Joiner of Forces. Let's see. Which, yeah, it really just seems ridiculous to have this suspension come out of cycle like this. Let's see. It's a commander card. Whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, look at the top 6 cards in your library. 6 cards seems very high. You may put human creature cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains indestructible until the end of the turn. Put the rest of the cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. Yeah, that does seem like a ridiculously overpowered card. Like, what were they thinking there? I have no idea what they were even thinking to create a card like that. How do you even fix this? Like, first of all, it's only 4 mana when this should be a 7 mana card. When a non-human creature attacks, look at the top 6 cards. So if you wanted it to stick with when a non-human creature you control attacks, which is a bad setup because this just compounds over and over again. If you have 3 creatures attacking, then this triggers 3 different times. But if you want to keep that, it would be look at your 1 top card. You may put it, if it's a non-human creature, you can put it on the field. Or you say, whenever this card attacks, Winona Joiner of Forces particularly attacks, which then puts it in a more vulnerable position as a 4/4. Then you look at the top 3 cards. I think 3 is the maximum you would want to go in that. The idea that nobody seems to have thought of this card and balanced the card is shocking. It's really, really bad. It's a bad concept and a bad implementation. Also, I would say this is pretty terrible, that the way they even link to their own cards brings you to this hideous single screen page called gatherer.wizards.com instead of just that being a pop-up when you hover over something. And it still does seem like Gatherer in general would be fairly useless to find cards. And the best way to do it, I think, would be just to click random card over and over again. And even the website doesn't seem like it loads particularly fast. Next we have a game on Steam called Tornado Driver, which seems to be a driving asset flip game, infinite runner, where you're just driving in the middle of a tunnel. I don't even understand the tornado concept really in that. It's $1.19. It's English only. Doesn't deserve any more coverage than that. I'm very surprised he's gonna block there, but okay. By all means, block there. We should win here. As long as I tap this guy and then throw everything I've got at him. Or just wait for him to realize he's lost. That works too. We have a game on Steam here called Welcome to Chichester or Chichester OVN 3: The Mysterious Affair of the Hotel. I've been seeing these games. These low effort, terribly animated visual novel ripoffs. They're always tagged with sexual content, and they seem to come out not overly frequently, but they do come out, seems like every 6 months or something. $1.69, the price is not too expensive, but then you have 44 Steam achievements. That really goes to show it's probably an achievement game, and it's English only, no full audio or any other language. And yeah, there's just no quality there, so there'd really be no reason whatsoever to put that on the follow list, but kind of no reason for it to exist at all. Next, we have a game on Steam that looks like it's just in Russian. I'm not even going to try and translate that because I don't read Russian. But by the looks of it, it does seem to be kind of a low effort visual novel too. English is not supported, 59 cents, Russian only. You can tell it's low effort just by the art style. Even if you did like this art style, you can tell by the background being practically all the same and the setting being designed in some way that you are going to be in the exact same area, it seems like, for the entirety of the story. Whereas if you were going to try and tell a tale, whether it's a visual novel or a TV episode or a movie or even a novel, having good visual imagery one way or another, whether you're narrating what is outside or describing the outside environments, is part of using descriptive language and setting a scene. And if you don't have that, your story is going to suffer. I tried to watch the TV Netflix, it's on Netflix now, show Community, and that definitely, as I was fast forwarding through a few episodes, it definitely felt like a lot of the scenes were designed to be in the exact same place over and over again, which was probably a budgetary concern, but it definitely hurt my attempts to even appreciate or understand that series, and I really failed to appreciate or understand that series. So yeah, I watched, I think, the first episode of every season, which, unless those episodes were specifically different, and then I think I watched the very last episode, and or bits of it. I fast forwarded through everything because I found nothing interesting there. The premise really threw me off to start with. Very, very old actors, established actors, all going to a community college. Just doesn't seem like realistic, when it would have been easier to just have them all be employees or employees at like a shared office building, or employees at the same job, like that same concept of just we need an excuse to get all of these people in the same place at the same time. That concept works so much better realistically when you don't have people going to a community college. Because I imagine if you are an older person going to a community college, you're probably also working a job, and you're probably not spending a lot of time hanging out at a community college after hours studying or doing any of that, and the whole concept kind of falls apart with online education now. Let's see. Ooh. Well, we'll toss that one. But there definitely is also the possibility that I didn't give it a fair shot, and I wasn't just in the right mood. So that might be the case too. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Dark Heart Mansion, which looks like it's a kind of low polygon puzzle, escape the room horror house, escape the horror house experience. If anything, it feels kind of like a Seventh Guest clone in a small way, which I really wish the Seventh Guest series was better. It should have been better. There should have been some series better than the Seventh Guest series to point to as like, here's a haunted mansion that you're going to run through and see some spooky things and solve some puzzles. But you really have to get to something like BioShock 1 before you have something that's sort of like that. But then when you talk about BioShock 1, you're basically doing a first-person shooter at that point, and there are very few puzzles in the game. So I'm just going to be forever doomed until I can get one more mana, and then once I can get one more mana, I could start to play more things. Let's go ahead and attack here with that. Dark Heart Mansion is $4.99 and it's English and Italian, and it's just not visually polished enough. So you just exiled my card and did 2 damage to me. That sucks. I wish I could say that when I played extra, some extra magic, that it was way easier off screen to get 15 wins. And while it was slightly easier, it still wasn't to the level of ease that I feel like I've had in the past with Hearthstone. Hearthstone did seem like it was much more of a set it and forget it style of game. Probably because you didn't time out and auto concede as fast in Hearthstone. You could just let it drag on until somebody got bored and quit. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Chalice, which looks like it's some horror visuals, but it doesn't look like there's a real game here so much. Just kind of seems like these probably are somewhat asset flips, and that's it. It's VR, it's free, so I guess the price is right. Allegedly has full audio in all the languages it supports. Yeah. That doesn't strike me as a good quality VR game, of which we've seen very few good quality VR games. See, take note there, they just handed me a Core 2020 card, which are right on the verge of not being useful at all. So even when you're getting cards, it may not really matter. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article here. A new Metal Slug games for consoles and mobile is planned for release in 2020. The development is currently 80% complete. You would kind of hope it to be 100% complete before you're announcing it. But alright. I don't know how many people really want to play Metal Slug in general, let alone on mobile. Metal Slug, I believe, is the tank infinite shooter, side shooter game. Yeah, I don't know if there's really much to even say about Metal Slug. It's just one of those arcade games that existed at some point and didn't fail miserably, so I guess it has some small relevance because of it. TechRaptor has an article. A Dino Crisis remake was pitched by Capcom Vancouver. This was part of that video from, let's see, Game History Secrets, Dead Rising 5, Did You Know Gaming was the people that made the video. Yeah. And yeah, okay, they pitched a bunch of things. That doesn't really mean anything. Particularly when you're talking about Dino Crisis, the idea of kind of a stealth action shooter game, something like Resident Evil, except for it's dinosaurs instead of zombies. Like, you could do that, certainly. Some company out there could try to compete with Capcom and have a game like that. It doesn't have to be Dino Crisis or called Dino Crisis. But I don't know if that in any way would be any more sellable than the next Resident Evil, which would have that name recognition and have like confirmed years of success, even though a lot of the Resident Evil games weren't amazingly successful. Most of them were at least moderately successful. And honestly, it's not like Capcom has a copyright on zombie games, so if you wanted to make a game that was a direct ripoff of Resident Evil, you probably could get away with it, as long as you don't have like Umbrella in the name of the bad guy. And the Evil Within is just one of the persons that worked on Resident Evil 4 leaving Capcom and going to Bethesda, which was probably a mistake, and then making Evil Within 1, and then seems like he stepped down as director and put someone else in charge for Evil Within 2, which might explain why it's such a different game. But yeah, I think you would probably get at least a few thousand more sales by making yet another zombie game compared to making a dinosaur game, and that's probably the reason why we have never seen anything like Dino Crisis come out. It is one of those games that would make some sense for like Microsoft to try and make a Smash Brothers type game and say, let's license the appearance of a bunch of these characters and bring them back and test the waters to see if anybody cares about any of these characters. I can't even name you who is the main character in Dino Crisis. But at best, something that's short and maybe like a Telltale game would probably be better suited than trying to bring back Dino Crisis or a game like Dino Crisis in its entirety. Well, we have Satisfactory is now on Steam, which I feel like it's always been on Steam. It's just about to come out of early access, I think. It is $26.99. Yeah. I'm not sure I really want to bother to play a game like this, but maybe there's something to this. I didn't realize there was a first-person mode that you were kind of running around here. You can see it's very positive, but it also feels like one of those games that would just take a very, very long time. Yeah, the more I look at this trailer, though, it does look like it definitely seems like you have the factory building element, but then you also have a whole survival element and first person element too. So that there might be something more. I should have blocked this guy. Yeah, I was gonna lose anyways. So yeah, I guess when Satisfactory comes out of early access, that's my line. Once they have the confidence to say it's out of early access, then I think I'd be willing to play Satisfactory. I may not stick with it super long. I may just try to kind of rush through it, and I don't know if there actually is a storyline there where you at some point just succeed and see credits, which might be a concern, certainly, if it just kind of never ends. I could see myself covering Satisfactory a lot like I covered City Skylines, where I would play it just for a brief hour or two and then have had my fill. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Updated PlayStation 5 Future of Gaming event. Twitch ad leaks a possible June 11th date. Let's see, Sony has confirmed that it was June 11th. So this is the new date for the PlayStation event. We'll see if it gets pushed back again. Like anything and everything could cause a delay in these presentations. Well, and at some point Sony is just going to have to poop or get off the pot, to use a crude phrase, and they're going to have to decide whether to move forward or whether just to cancel the PlayStation 5 coming out this holiday season. And this. If only now I had a cauldron familiar. Next we have a game on Steam called Ironsmith Medieval Simulator Prologue. This is another demo. Doesn't look terrible. In fact, it looks rather nice. Although I don't know how much gameplay really would be around being an ironsmith. You can kind of do that in Skyrim already. And mostly I'm just pointing out the fact that it seems like the prologues and demos are continuing to be encouraged, or just continuing to be listed for one reason or another. Perhaps there was something in some feedback that was given to game publishers that says, hey, you might get a double boost if you put out a demo, promote your game for 6 months by having a demo on Steam, and then you can get another bit of advertisement by putting your game out in early access after the demo has been released. It does seem like an odd choice that so many developers now are calling everything prologue, and that we're seeing a whole lot more demos than before. Next we have a game on Steam called Pirate Island Mini Golf VR. And you can see it has teleporting that is pretty rough. I don't think I would want to play mini golf in VR. Honestly, if I am going to play mini golf, I kind of want to have control of a putter and do it in the real world. This is early access for $19.99 English full audio. That's too expensive also. Yeah. Unlike other physical activities, mini golf is something that I think most people could probably compete in and do. Well, maybe not compete, but participate in. Even if you're like wheelchair bound completely, as long as you're not paraplegic and just not capable of swinging your arms or wrist at all, that there's a high chance that you can do as badly in mini golf as any other large number of able-bodied people would be able to do it. Whereas if you were to play something like football, soccer, baseball, basketball, you really don't have those same experiences. Those do require a level of physicality and just commitment, and often you have to have a field available to you also. So I could see doing something like that. Tennis, I could see doing that in VR just because it would be more convenient and easier. And sure, it still would be convenient and easier to do putt-putt in VR. But I don't know how often people want to play mini golf anyways. And you can't really have the professional... Well, people can play football, certainly. Most people can't play football on a professional field with professional players. And that's where the fantasy of doing something like this in video games would improve the situation or enhance the scenario compared to just doing it in real life. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Edge of Dreams, which, let's assume that it's not just trying to promote Edge of Tomorrow, which I swear there is some advertising group. I wouldn't be surprised if it is actually Scientologists themselves that are trying to promote the movie Edge of Tomorrow because the main actor in the movie is a Scientologist. But there's definitely somebody that gets on Reddit at least once a month and talks about Edge of Tomorrow as a movie for no good reason. There's just no reason. That movie came out, it failed, they changed the name. It came out again, it failed. There's nothing you can do to save that movie, so hiring some trolls or some bots to talk about it on Reddit just feels ridiculous. We had a similar, but I think more natural experience with The Matrix, and The Matrix 1 kind of did make sense when people were obsessing about it and talking about it. But even that got overhyped, and very few people are going to be willing to try and talk about or hype up The Matrix after the sequels kind of ruined the experience, or at least soured the experience enough. Probably would go down as an all-time great had they not made any of the sequels. and just ended the first movie where it ended and been done with it. But I think at this point they're actually thinking about rebooting the whole thing. Edge of Dreams here is early access for $13.49 in English only. It has some dark screenshot syndrome also. I can't make out any of the enemies, they're so far away. So yeah, I don't think that deserves to be on the fall list. Next we have a game on Steam called Kojouji. I don't know how you pronounce that. Sci-fi survival horror puzzle game. Okay. Little dark screenshot syndrome, but I can make out some hallways. But what I'm not really seeing is any enemies or gameplay elements. So yeah, either this game is just a flashlight horror game walking simulator, or it's just being so deceptive that it's risking me dismissing it. Let's see. The game has multiple endings depending on the achievements of the player, but there are no actual achievements outside of the game. So that's oddly phrased, probably to be search engine optimized. Player will have to discover how to complete the objectives and get the complete ending. Yeah, it sounds like just total BS actually. I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't actual multiple endings, or if there's really only 2 endings. Let's go ahead and sacrifice that. Sacrifice that. Yeah, I just don't see anything in that game. Not enough to justify it being on the fall list. I am just gonna continuously have to raise my standards with the fall list, because even now, when no new games are even coming out, even now it's still definitely a situation where it's not really worth it to lower your standards. Next we have a game on Steam called Cannon Ship, which looks like a side-scrolling shooter. And yeah, just kind of the simplistic graphics, a busy background that could be distracting. And while this is more of a Western side-scrolling shooter in the sense that it doesn't look like it's an actual bullet hell shooter that is just incredibly complicated, and that might be a small selling point to me if I ever was going to play a side-scrolling shooter. There's nothing here that would really make this stand out or look interesting. It's $8.49 English, allegedly full audio. Let's see. Man, I keep on yawning. TechRaptor has a featured article here. If you're ready to attack and dethrone God, here are some video games where you can. And then this looks like a screenshot from Shark Boy and Lava Girl from all I could think. God of War series. Clive Barker's Jericho. You're fighting like old gods in that one. I think the Clive Barker's Jericho title, probably you could take that story and asset flip a first-person shooter game elements into it fairly fairly easily and have a better experience than what Jericho actually was. It would be an interesting idea, but also probably a nightmare to get the licenses. Like, that's inherently the problem with having famous cinematographers, authors, people like that put their name to a property, is that then once you want to make a remake, you have to renegotiate. Let's see, they also have Smite, which I don't think too many people Smite. Asura's Wrath, which you have to get the DLC to get the actual ending. But I don't think that's on PC. Scribblenauts, I guess at some point you fight a god in Scribblenauts. Silent Hill 3, which I don't think is on PC. Dishonored: Death of the Outsider, and literally every JRPG ever made. The real question here is, why is this listicle getting written at all? Other than TechRaptor just needs to fill its Twitter feed and feel like it's actually doing some work. Because it's probably not the desire of too many people to particularly seek out games where you fight or kill a god. That is a unique search metric for sure. You would have to be a very, very niche anti-theist subgroup if those were the only kind of games you like to play. And honestly, gods as they're traditionally depicted don't make good enemies. The end of Bayonetta 1, you're fighting was effectively a god, but even in that case, you have a creature that is vulnerable, whereas most depictions of gods are that they are completely invulnerable and completely either overpowered or all powerful. So they're not good enemies. They're also hard to characterize and flesh out as characters because you might be stepping on people's toes. It's much more interesting to have a bad guy be a megalomaniacal sociopath who thinks he's a god than it is to have him actually be a god. Moving on, the IGDA has a job listing for not them, but Tactile Games. Tactile Games is looking for a programming engineer full-time. We're seeing maybe a slight return to video game job listings happening, but it's probably going to be very slow going and not on any major scale. I doubt we'll see too many new studios pop up for the next year or new projects that need to scale up happen. OpenCritic has an article here. The Last of Us on HBO lands its pilot episode director, which, okay. Excuse me. Let me take a moment to drink some water. Yeah, I don't really believe that HBO is guaranteed to make a Last of Us TV series, and I don't know how far you go with that until it just kind of devolves into what The Walking Dead devolved into. Because that's really all they're trying to do here. Yeah. Almost certainly this is being pitched as this will be The Walking Dead for HBO. HBO certainly could probably handle a few more successful series. Every channel could. If anything, what I'd like to see happen with cable TV is that a lot of the cable channels just give up the ghost and realize that they don't have enough budget or enough viewers to try to make shows in general. If you saw something like the Paramount Network that has Yellowstone and like Bar Rescue and Whiskey 76, like there's 3 shows that probably most people haven't even heard of, whereas if those 3 shows were on the USA network or FX network, they would get a lot more viewership, and then the FX network would have more things that they're airing every Monday through Friday during prime time. That's really the problem here, is that nobody really has a full lineup except for the standard over-the-air channels, and even the standard over-the-air channels are fairly struggling to have good content during their primetime lineup. Meanwhile, also, people are increasingly not wanting to waste their time watching TV. Yep. And the experience is not getting better either. This is only anecdotal, but I just upgraded from a Hopper 1 to a Hopper 3 from Dish, and the Hopper 3 is just terribly programmed, and it was resetting itself like 3 or 5 times a day until I realized that I had to plug it into a different power strip, and you're not supposed to plug it into a power strip at all. And I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. This is an expensive computer. But apparently I either have a really terrible power strip that wasn't giving it full power all the time, or there's something just wrong with it. But even after I fixed the power strip issue and it locking up 3 times a day, it still crashes when you try to use the Netflix app on it, which is like the only streaming app built into it. They've done nothing to improve the DLNA media home server streaming algorithms in it. The Hopper 3 is still probably the best DVR you can have. It's just that people don't really need a DVR anymore. Because everybody's going to streaming services, which for the most part, streaming services are just getting better and better, although maybe they're getting a little bit more separated out, and that's annoying. Hulu still seems like it's pretty useless. Amazon Prime seems like it's only really useful if you want to watch old TV and old movies, or the maybe 3 or 4 worth watching Amazon originals. One of the major things that I used Amazon Prime for, I probably had it for like a year and never watched anything on it at all, and the only thing I wanted to watch was the last season of Hannibal, which is now, all 3 of those seasons are on Netflix, and it took them a sweet long time for it to get on Netflix, in all fairness, but yeah, it's definitely a situation where nothing really gets locked in a vault. Nothing gets stopped from actually eventually making its way to Netflix, except for Disney stuff. And if you want to watch Disney stuff and that's really a concern to you, then you're gonna have to get Disney Plus. And Disney is about the only company that can get away with that. Whereas any other company, you would just not watch their stuff. I don't know if I can win here. I don't know why that didn't. This is not hexproof. Here we go. Yep, the only real problem with Bola Citadel is that you have to have a lot of land to play it, and then a lot of land also destroys its success ratio. Or it hurts it quite a bit. It doesn't destroy the success ratio. Okay, so this now has reach. Next we have a game on Steam called Weapon Hacker, which looks like it's just a platformer shooter with some dark edges. It's $14.99, English only. It's too expensive. Looks like it's going for kind of a Metroid clone, but boy, do the graphics just not line up with that visually. Not to justify that. Not to justify the price. TechRaptor has an article. An angry badger stabs lizards to death in Dunkirk. Okay, looks like it's maybe a beat 'em up fighting game. Or an infinite runner. Side battler. It looks more like a fighting game from all the scenes here. All the user interface elements. The game does not currently have a release date. I really should start just curating these previews. Like, even when I was opening the tab from TechRaptor today, I thought to myself, I should consider just not opening this and just not talking about it, because it doesn't serve anyone, really. It's not beneficial to talk about a game that doesn't have a release date, may not come out 6 months from now or 2 years from now. You just don't know. Let's go and tap this guy and attack. Well, not quite there yet. Not quite yet. Gamma Sutra has an article here. The UK government calls for more evidence in the ongoing loot box debate, which is to say that the debate will just get stretched out more and more. We'll see what the UK eventually decides to do. I imagine not much, but even if they did, it doesn't seem like the too many countries would probably bother to follow too much, or not very quickly at least. It could be 5 to 10 years before all of like Australia or the UK decided to put major restrictions on loot boxes. United States had a similar issue with online gambling where it was on the books illegal. Everybody knew it was on the books illegal, and yet everybody was still doing it, and it wasn't until a very long time after that point that people started getting in trouble and they started shutting down websites. Alright, I'm doomed. Well, I'm not actually doomed, but probably could have been doomed. EA announced that they're making a new Need for Speed game. Need for Speed is being developed by Criterion. There's a whole announcement here. It's not anything super interesting, really. Official Deep Silver is retweeting this game Chorus, which they announced a couple of weeks ago, and I have already forgotten about it. And this whole trailer this whole screenshot doesn't really remind me at all. So it seems like what they're going to try and do is have a slow build to get the name Chorus into the minds of players, and then probably do a secondary announcement to remind people what this game is. Yeah, Chorus is the new space shooter from DSF or DS Deep Silverfish Labs. Okay. And let's see, do we have a trailer that can even slightly remind me what this is? Can't even fast forward on Twitter videos. It's annoying. It really feels like it's just a Destiny clone. You fly around in space and shoot. There's a creepy girl with goo coming out of her eyes. I think there's kind of a monster horde. Maybe she doesn't have goo coming out of her eyes as much as she has weird, like, Chinese tattoos over her eyes. But it does seem like you're mostly just shooting things in space. And there is this, like, red energy that is eating entire planets. I don't know how they think this would be a sales point for most people, though. The idea that you would want to play a game when you're in a 3D space shooter game. Maybe they're trying to beat Bethesda, because Bethesda has been trying to develop a space game for a long time, but I think Ubisoft was also working on a space game for a long time, and they haven't gotten anywhere with that space game either. So yeah, I don't know why Deep Silver thinks they can succeed when that genre itself has not been popular. It hasn't been popular for an extremely long time, and I don't think it's coming back. I wouldn't mind doing a sequence where I'm flying a spaceship, running around shooting things in a spaceship, but I wouldn't want that to be the main game. The only people I think that would want to play a game like that are like spaceship simulators, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter fans. But I think they would demand a Star Wars tie-in. I don't think X-Wing versus TIE Fighter fans are gonna decide that they would be willing to play Chorus. Yeah, as a replacement. Be a partial replacement, but I don't think it would be a full replacement. Well, this guy's taking his time. Here we have a game on Steam called Fear the Dark, and you can look at the user interface to see that it's not very polished. It's just an asset flip horror game, mostly in the darkness. Oddly, one screenshot or a couple of screenshots have black bars on the side. This is $2.39 with a bunch of languages. Yeah, nothing of interest. TechRaptor has this article. Borderlands science has been a phenomenal success for research. Just over 2 months ago, Borderlands science made its debut as an in-game way to solve real-world problems. Now this research project baked into Borderlands 3 has received an update from researchers associated with the project, and it's undeniably has been a phenomenal success. Borderlands Science is on its face a simple puzzle game that people can play with Borderlands 3 for a change of pace. There's more to this game that meets the eyes. So it's like a protein folding game. I haven't heard anything about this. It's really, really ridiculous that that's in a Borderlands game, but it does add something to the Borderlands series that it's missing, which is some falling action downtime in a game that is usually designed for non-stop always rising action. But I would also say that the non-stop always rising action of Borderlands is its selling point. So I don't know if I fully agree with the idea of putting puzzles into Borderlands, unless they're extremely simple puzzles. But also, it's kind of a genius move by 2K and Gearbox, because they don't have to design the puzzles or anything. They can just have the scientific researchers make the puzzles, and the puzzles actually somewhat relate towards some scientific discovery. Although, in all fairness, I bet this is kind of a whole bunch of BS. I bet it isn't really providing as useful scientific data as the scientists are claiming it does, because if the scientists claimed, oh, actually this is just a huge failure and a waste of time, they'd probably get their funding cut, and they don't want to do that. So it's fairly typical for researchers to always hype up their results and show that they're making progress, even if they aren't, which is bad science and unethical, but it happens because everybody's chasing the next grant. Everybody's trying to keep their funding. Again, it's a great example of capitalism not really working for science and not being the best system for science, or in the same way that capitalism is not really the best system for arts and artists. Let's see, moving on, we have a Gamatsu article, The Escapist Indie Showcase set for June 11th, featuring over 70 indie games updated. So, both the PlayStation presentation and this Escapist Indie showcase seem like they're happening on the exact same day, which probably means that the Escapist Indie showcase will be overshadowed by the PlayStation 4 presentation. But it is kind of a great example of how something always bumps something else, and it's very difficult to find the right time to announce a product or do a presentation in the video game world. Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Touhou Senran Sin Undefined Fantastic Object. These are several Touhou games, I think older Touhou games, being listed on Steam. English is not supported though, it's $14.99, Japanese only. These are, I think, mainline Touhou shoot 'em up games. Which I guess, if I was going to play a shoot 'em up, Touhou games are probably the ones to pick. But since it doesn't support English, I don't think there's a reason for me to put it on the fall list. Same is true for Toho Chiridin Subterranean Anisim, which, again, just old Toho Witch Girl shoot 'em up games. $14.99. It's a great example of just how much the Japanese love to rip off their consumers for some of these niche products. The price is just extremely high. And same is true for Toho Fujin Roku Mountain of Faith. It would be interesting to know how long each one of these games are, whether these give you 20 hours of enjoyment or 5 hours of enjoyment. $14.99 again. Gamatsu has an article here. IGN Summer of Gaming 2020 has been postponed to June 10th. Now. So, yeah. There's more and more games getting pushed into a smaller and smaller announcement windows. And it really does feel like at some point just somebody is going to blink and say, we're just going to postpone the launch and the announcement of our games, all our games, for a year. Or for summer of 2021. Or January of 2021. No, January's not even late enough. If you're going to skip and not announce a game now, you're pretty much committing to the holiday season of 2021. So summer, maybe, if you can't wait till Christmas, but probably Christmas for most people. My new chair is working better. It's just still not perfect. If anything, my back probably is a great argument that when you're young, doing more crunches and more sit-ups and building up core strength is a good move to always do in strengthening your back. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article. A zombie first-person shooter called Infected Maze is coming to the Switch. Might be something, or might be nothing. Like, the screenshot is a little weird to have a character cover their eyes so you can't see the face technology, have a floating syringe, have what looks like an emergency call button in the other hand, which seems like a weird thing, have a gun, but then not really have much of a UI otherwise. It's on Steam, so we could check it out, I guess. There we go. Infected Maze. Yeah, this looks like a low effort, like, kind of asset flippy zombie game. It's rated positive with 16 reviews and it came out earlier this year. Yeah, there's nothing here. This is not quality enough. $5.99 English, Japanese. More and more we're seeing garbage games that shouldn't even be on Steam make their way towards the Switch. That's a problem. Well, it's a problem in my book. Maybe it's not a problem in Nintendo's book. But at a certain point, I think the Switch runs the risk of being known as the place where all the shovelware games go. And I think that probably hurt some of the prestige of the Vita and the PlayStation Portable too, is that it was kind of hard, even now, even posthumously, it's kind of hard to name what the great games on the Vita and the PlayStation Portable were. Moving on, we have an article, adventure platformer Reggie, his cousin, two scientists, and most likely the end of the world are coming to the PS4, PS1, and Switch. It's a gravity-based cartoony 2.5D cell shading platformer. Okay. Let's see if we can skip through this trailer. Well, this kind of looks like it's a joke, almost troll platformer game. Seems kind of Flappy Birdie-ish. Yeah, it feels like a joke game. I would have to really get some feedback from some trusted sources to decide that that was something worth playing. Next, we have an article from Gamatsu. Azure Striker Gunvolt 2 is coming to PC on June 22nd. Which I think, unless I'm thinking of a different game, I feel like Gunvolt 1 just came to PC less than like 6 months ago. So I don't know if the Gunvolt series has been released on the PlayStation a long time ago. Yeah, it came out for the 3DS. The first game did. So I don't know if this is just the developers are working at a breakneck speed to make a sequel so quickly, or if these are re-releases of some other game that very possibly is under a different name. Gamatsu has an article here. One Way Heroics Plus is coming to the Switch June 18th. Looks kind of pixel graphic-y. So that's going to be a little bit of a hard sell, I imagine. With a name like One Way Heroics, it's a side-scrolling RPG game. Yeah, that doesn't look particularly interesting. To basically have an RPG Maker game that just has the screen always scrolling to the right. I don't think that's enough of a gimmick to interest me. Let's see. Gamatsu has an article. Chinese RPG and simulation game Immortal Life adds PlayStation 4 and Switch versions. It previously was only coming out for the PC. Which, this doesn't look terrible. Like fishing in a nice looking little lake area. Although, it really will come down to the quality of how much of an RPG really is it, or how good of an RPG is it really. The Metroidvania game HAAK, I guess that's pronounced Hack, is coming to the Switch, PC, iOS, and Android. Looks kind of like a platformer shooter. Let's see. But they're calling it a Metroidvania game. No release date is announced yet, apparently. It really is like just confusing mess of announcements. It's like we're waiting for games to be announced that will have release dates. Meanwhile, plenty of games are getting announced that don't have release dates. Everybody really should be all on the same page with, hey, these games are coming out when the Xbox One Series X is coming out and when the PlayStation 5 is coming out. But they just can't even decide when those consoles are gonna officially confirm that they're coming out even. Moving on, we have a game called Crafting Game Craftopia, launches for PC in early access in July. So it's an announcement for early access of a game. It's just always got to take 5 more steps back. I have an announcement for an announcement for an announcement for an announcement for an announcement of a game. 100 years from now, we will make a Final Fantasy game. We don't know the number yet or what the story will be about, but we know it will be a Final Fantasy game. Moving on, Gamatsu has a narrative adventure game called Sumir, which has been announced for Switch and PC. I think we may have seen something about this. Here's an 18-second trailer. It has a different art style to it. Certainly it's a little bit more zoomed in, although it's a little questionable as far as how much game actually exists in the game. If it's a narrative adventure, does that mean it has no action in it at all? Is that what they mean by narrative adventure, or does that just mean that it's not going to be 100% focused around violence and action, or action of some sort? TechRaptor has an article here. Nimbus Infinity returns after a long absence. I don't know what Nimbus Infinity is. Apparently it was discussed in 2018, and now they're still talking about it. Alright, well, with that brings me to the Humble Bundle store, which I don't think there's going to be any new bundles. Although it does seem like 19 hours from now the City Skyline bundle ends, and let's see, well, a manga book bundle ends. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a new game bundle by Wednesday. See, this manga book bundle, which I assume you're just getting digital versions of it, has basically just the first few issues of some mangas that they're not probably the oldest of stories. Like Your Lie in April is not particularly old, but then there's also Parasite and Beck, which makes them not kind of the newest ones either. Space Brothers, Princess Jellyfish. Yeah, none of those strike me as specifically brand new mangas that you would be reading if you were trying to read mangas. Yeah, I don't know if there's any legitimate reason why you'd want the digital format of mangas, other than to maybe try and support the industry, but who knows how much of that actually goes to the actual creators of those mangas in Japan, and how much of that just gets pocketed by the localization team and the distributors. Let's see. Back on my Twitter thing. Atlas teases exciting news for PC Gaming Show 2020 June 3rd, or through the 13th, or June 13th, and launched a Steam creator page. Steam curator page. And is there anything else even on my Twitter feed that's new? No. So yeah, Atlas now has their releases, with Catherine Classic being the only thing that they have, and upcoming games not being listed. Almost certainly Catherine Full Body gets released on PC. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. And if Atlas decides to go deeper down as well and start releasing Persona games or things like that on Steam, I would certainly appreciate it. But I don't know if I can still trust them to let me play those games. So it's kind of hard to justify buying a game that you know is going to get like content ID claimed or possibly even DMCA'd. Because you just kind of don't know what would happen there. So yeah. And here we have a problem because I don't remember where I stopped. If it was H-I-J, maybe I had done I's. Well, I think I'm gonna go back to H's on my wish list, and we'll do some wish list cleanup since we've still got some victories and I still have some energy in me. Although that's probably gonna run out fairly quickly. So yeah, alright, looking at the wish list starting with H. Half Dead was the Cell clone game. That, yeah, Half Dead 2 is more the one I wanted to cover, but I'd be willing to cover them both. End of Fate, Hard West, mostly positive. Harvester. See, we really just need to look at things that are not written, not reviewed well. Like here, there's Hard Z Co-op Hope Puzzles. I should consider removing that since it only has 7 reviews from 2016. That doesn't have any relevancy. And frankly, most of the ones that I should think about getting rid of Hexalogic. I don't know if I want to play any more of those kinds of puzzle games. While I've been trying to get rid of visual novels, I've actually kind of failed miserably at actually removing any of the visual novels. They're just not playing that way. Because I look at them and I go, no, actually these are pretty good quality ones. That I think I did a very more conservative and tight job about not putting mediocre or bad visual novels on the wish list in the first place. Seems like I might get hoisted on my own petard here. He's just gonna keep on doing that. So I just need to attack. Just attack with everything. This is the only thing that's gonna let me win. Alright, so we have a game called Hidden Through Time, and the images don't want to load. We have the Higurashi When They Cry series in totality. I have the first one here, but probably would be a mistake for most people to gift me any more of those. This is a $35 visual novel. That's pretty expensive. It'd be kind of hard to justify playing the Hitman series, but I wouldn't hate it. Home Sweet Home, Homesick. Yeah, we already talked about these. We've already done the H's. House Flipper, Hover, You, Hustle Cat, Hypersensitive Bob, Hiss. I Am Bread. Probably would spotlight that if I was gifted it. This is free, so I don't really need to cover it. Let's see. Ikaraga. I probably would just spotlight this since it's an incredibly difficult game. There is that problem, certainly, of there are games here that I would just spotlight and I wouldn't really play all the way through. Let's look at Infectinator 3. That doesn't look like a particularly interesting game. And then Infinifactory compared to Satisfactory becomes the question. Do you really need to play both of those? And what's the difference between both of those? Do I have enough to tap this? No, I don't. Let's see. Insanity's Blade. It's mostly positive. This will be a weird game to cover, so, for sure. Invisible Apartments. I guess I decided to keep these even though I probably shouldn't. Just trying to keep like one Western visual novel game if I was going to go down that route. Let's see. Julia, Jade Empire, Jazzpunk. This game, Jera, has no reviews. It's a student project, probably. Let's see. Journal. I've been trying to get this game, but it's always been way too expensive. Judge Dredd games are relevant, even though hard to play. I think Just Cause 4 can be removed. There's no reason, I think, to play that. This Just One Color could be probably removed. Let's see. We have one Kero no Sojo. That might be something. A karate fighting game rated very positively. Karma Flow, the rock opera video game. I definitely want to cover this. It's not particularly the greatest ever. Katamari game. Here we have a game called Keep in Mind Remastered. I might want to rethink that one. I'm about to lose. Kin Follett's The Pillars of Earth. I'm not sure how relevant that is. I don't own Kerbal Space Program on this account, but also it's not really worth buying at $40 because I wouldn't really make any new coverage on it. So if somebody gifted me that, they would just be so that I remembered that I own that game and have it on the same account. Here we have Kids with an S, and here we have Kids with a Z. Kill La Kill IF. Oh man, I'm gonna have to remove that. It sucks because I really wanted to play that, but clearly there's no justification there. Killing Floor 2, I think might have some relevance. Kindred Spirits on the Roof is a visual novel. Kingdom Rush Frontiers, I need to rethink that. Kingdom Two Crowns. Let's see what that is. That looks a lot like Bloodstained. Kingdom New Lands. I don't know if that's even the same Kingdom series. Here we have Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, which didn't they just announce a remaster of that? So that is a issue too. Kings of Israel. Kitty Powers Matchmaker, a gay dating game. Still probably deep enough to, if you are going to go into dating games, it makes sense. Let's see what Knee Deep is. I either covered this or I played this on my cell phone, so owning it on this account is kind of not necessary. Knights and Bikes I'd like to play. Might want to rethink that one. And then here we have two fighting games that I should reevaluate. to see if, like, I don't think the Kohimi Inbu series is probably a relevant enough fighting game. Here we have a soccer game. I need to rethink about that because I don't know how many soccer games I'd really want to play. There's a fighting game that's a student project. Here's something that looks like a student project also. I don't know if I really want to play La Mulana as a series. Yeah, and I guess we'll go through the L's, and I guess this will be our last game on Magic. Where does that put us specifically on Magic? Yeah, I need 7 more victories. We're working up towards rank 70, and I have 15 hours to sign up for the Omniscient Draft, which I don't think makes sense to do, unfortunately. So, yeah. I don't think it makes sense to open a bunch of core set 2020 cards. Cards wise, what did we get new? Just 1 more of those and 1 copy of these. Okay. Let's see. Labyrinth of Refrain, Covered in Darkness. We should think about that. Lake of the Voices looks like it might be a hidden object game. Lake Ridden looks like it might be a hidden object game. Lamplight City looks like it's probably a point and click adventure game, but I'll double check. Last Days of Zune. Here we have a Last Stitch Goodnight from 2017. I need to rethink that since it has only 3 reviews. Leader Alligator was a game that I saw a bunch of mainstream journalists like, but it didn't really have much relevancy. Layers of Fear 2, I guess I'm kind of committed to it and I'd be willing to play it, even though I didn't really love Layers of Fear 1. Although I did like the DLC of Layers of Fear 1 better than that. Legend of K Anniversary, probably a no to that one. See, Lego DC Supervillains, Lego Marvel Superheroes 2, Lego Incredibles, Lego Worlds. Lego Worlds in particular has been the most expensive game for what it offers, since it was more of an online game and the servers I think have been shut down. Leisure Suit Larry games, 2 of them, one of which I don't think you can even buy anymore. So yeah, I don't think Land of the Lounge Lizards Reloaded is ever going to be available for purchase again. But even the newest game, Wet Dreams Don't Dry, is way too expensive for what they are. Let's see, Lemia. Check that out. I'm basically looking at everything at this point. Lethal League Blaze may not even be the best Lethal League game, so I should probably investigate that. Here we have one called Leith Episode 1, which is episodic, so I should consider that. A couple Letter Quest games. I think I might be willing to play one of those. Here we have something that's been in early access since 2018, so I probably should remove that. Early access games shouldn't be on the wish list. Anyways, Life is Strange Before the Storm. Yeah, eventually if I got that cheap, I would be alright with playing that. It is Lightning Returns, another Final Fantasy game. There's a game called Lights Out that's mixed. There's a game called Limelight that might be a little too simplistic. There's a game called Lines that's just positive, but then Lines Infinite is very positive. And then here's a game called Line Way. There's a game called Lit, which might be too simplistic. Light Briar Rose looks fine. Little Bug. Little Busters is a visual novel about baseball. I don't think I'd remove that. Little Inferno. Little Kite. Little Misfortune. Again a game that was covered by like YouTubers and hyped, and then people forgot about it before it even came out. Little Mouse Encyclopedia, Little Nightmares. I feel like there was a game called Little Nightmare and then a game called Little Nightmares, but apparently not. Little Witch Academia apparently is now very, very positive. I thought it had some trouble when it first came out. Here's another visual novel. Lo-Fi Ping Pong. It's rated very positive. Logic Bots. I'll check that. Lone Survivor. Long Arm of the Law. Long Live the Queen is... I need to rethink this game because it's a Princess Maker game and they just don't look good. It's just really hard to make coverage of those types of games, so probably not a big reason to remove it from the wish list, because I could still spotlight it and go, yeah, this is a spin-off of a style of the Princess Maker games, not made by the same company that makes the Princess Maker games. In the same way, I still would like to own the Princess Maker games when we get down to P's. Lorelei is the third in the Cat Lady series, and I should get that and finish that series. There's a lot of series I've done 1 or 2 sequels to, and I haven't gotten around to finishing them. This looks like a hidden object game. Lost in Secular Love. Looks like a visual novel. Lost in Vivo. Looks like it might be a horror game. This looks like a hidden object game. Hidden object game. And more hidden object games. Lost Winds. Love at First Sight is a visual novel. It's with the weird monster girls. Love Thyself, a Horatio story. I don't know if that's worth having and covering, even though it's a free game. Love Cube is another visual novel. Lovecraft's Untold Stories I want to think about. Man, there's a lot of things that start with L. Lucas 3. I have Lucas 1 and 2, so I want to own Lucas 3. Even though it's mixed. I think that really is a case of the creator just making too many games too fast. Lugaria HD might not be really weird enough. Too weird of a game to really play. Lumina Sky. Let's check what that is. Lust for Darkness. I'd want this game if it was really cheap, but it's also mixed, and it's also would have to be censored heavily even to do a spotlight for. So I probably should just have a come to Jesus moment on that and just say, you know what, that's not realistic. Okay, and so that then leaves us with M, and if we look at the point on the scroll, we're about halfway down the wish list as far as doing cleanup. Profile wise, we have 21 days. We're at gold tier 2. We need to play some kind of draft somewhat at some point. Deck wise and pack wise, we're still fine. And daily deals, when are they reset? In 15 hours. Yeah. So there's really nothing to really say. We're at rank 70, so we need to get up 10 ranks in less than 16 days, and I think there's no real problem for that, because in 7 days we'll have the bonus rewards, which would help us do that. Well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below in the description box. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.